Hey everybody, Boz here, and welcome to Microsoft Excel Essential Tools and Techniques Part 2. Some of you may have checked out the first video, but regardless, we'll jump into this one. So we're going to be looking at more intermediate essential Excel shortcuts, formulas, tools, and techniques throughout this video. You know, an overview, you're going to have an Excel file, so make sure to grab that one that was provided to you. And in that Excel file, I'll pull it up in a minute, you're going to see that modules 1 through 3, they were covered in my part 1 video, so they're not going to be covered today. Those are more the essential type of items. And then in module 4, we're going to analyze some data. In module 5, we're going to do a sensitivity analysis. In module 6, we're going to do VH and X lookups. Some of you have never heard of the X lookup. It's a newer one. Module 7, summarizing data. Number 8, adjusting data. Number 9, a little bit with transposing and pasting data. So analyzing data, the topics that we are going to cover in this one, this is the 4th module, we'll be adding a filter, sorting data, creating a pivot table, graphing a data set, and also inserting a chart and the paste special technique. So with that being said, I'm going to go over to my Excel file. And when you pull open your Excel file, here's the master guide. And this one is organized, you can see, in a series of modules. And we've got module 1 that has 18 steps in it. Module 2 has 17 steps. Module 3 has 20 steps. Those are all covered in my first video. So now in the second video, we're going to start with module 4. And we're going to go through modules 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 here is what it is. So in each of these modules, there's a few steps that we're going to cover. So to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to grab this tab and actually pull it over. And this is, whoops, and this is more just for my ease. But if you ever have to move a tab, you can kind of click on it and then just drag it over, so that I'm going to bounce back and forth between the master guide and then the different modules. I'm bouncing back and forth by using Control Page Up and Control Page Down here. So that being said, let's start with step 1 within module 4, analyzing data. And what I have here, it's a sales table. And when we think about the sales table, if we go down to the bottom, and I got to the bottom by doing an end down arrow key. Some of these I covered in part 1. So this video does assume that you have a decent knowledge of a lot of keyboard shortcuts, although whenever I'm doing them in this video, I'll talk to them. But end down arrow key. So I have nearly 100 lines of data, 5 columns. Invoice numbers, I've identified a customer by a number. The product, I've just called them different widgets. And then the sales amount, and then also the invoice date. So those are the items that I have, and we're going to want to analyze this data a little bit. So it says the first thing here is to put a filter on Alt-A-T, all right? So if I click Alt right there, and then A, and then T. And I don't hold those down in between. I just do Alt-A-T, 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 Alt-A-T. That's how it turns the filter on and off. You can also get there Control-Shift-L. Some people like that. For whatever reason, my hands, when they're on the home row, Alt-A-T just bounces off a little bit easier on my fingers. So, but if you like Control-Shift-L, go ahead and do that. You can also get there by clicking data and then going right here to filter. That definitely works as well, although whenever possible, do a keyboard shortcut. Now, one thing, like if you're over here in the space to the right and you do a data filter, if you're not within the data, oftentimes the filter won't work. So I'm trying to do an Alt-A-T right here. The filter is not working. So I need to click somewhere within my data. Right here, I'm within my data. I hit Alt-A-T and it puts it on the top. If you ever get that filter that doesn't go on the top row, I mean, you would just want to be careful about that. I do sometimes have to actually click on the 1 and then do Alt-A-T to get the filter there. You know, normally it just works as long as I'm somewhere within the data. But so Alt-A-T will turn that filter on. And then usually if people are filtering on, a common thing that they're going to be doing is sorting. Right now you can see it is sorted by invoice number, but we could sort smallest to largest. Nothing's going to happen because it was already there. We could do largest to smallest. Now we got the biggest invoice first. We could sort by customer, smallest to largest. So it's got all the sales to customer 101 are listed first. We could sort by widgets, smallest to largest, really whatever we want to do there. If we could do dollar amounts, largest to smallest, dates, whatever we want to do. So that is the sort, smallest to largest. Now you can also sort by color, and I'll just go back and I'll just sort by invoice here. But sometimes you might highlight data with a color. And let's just say that you did that because you're reviewing these transactions and there's some that you wanted to investigate further. You know, maybe invoice number 10, you're like, yeah, I want to look at that one further. So you could maybe highlight that with a cell background key, and then maybe 14. You would click on background color. Again, I'm just saying that you were going through the data, you highlighted some stuff that you wanted to investigate further, and now maybe you just want all those up to the top. All right, so now you do sort, not smallest to largest, but sort by color, put the yellow up top, or you could do the yellow up top, no, they're on top. You could do the sort by color, no fill. Those are now on the bottom, okay, because it did the no fill stuff first. So different ways that you can do that. So I don't really use sheet view. Filter by color is a big thing that I'm going to use. So I'll just sort these back together. Now a filter, the normal way that I filter would be like, okay, let's say I only want sales to customer 101 right here as an example. I could click on this drop down box and I could go in here and select all, and then click just the customer I want. Let's say I just want customer 101. Now I have customer 101 there. I could undo that with a Control Z if I only want products, and I could do multiple things here. You know, if I only wanted widgets W and D as an example, I could click OK. And now we only have those. You can do multiple filters. So maybe I only want widgets, B and D. Now maybe I only want those to customer 1. All right, 101. I click OK, and I've just started to refine it a little bit further. Now sometimes if I've put a lot of filters on, you can go here and you could just click select all to get them back. All right, you could click select all. But sometimes if I have a lot of filters on, if it's a gigantic spreadsheet, and if I can't even remember what I have filtered, it's like I don't want to have to go look at each of those columns to try to figure out where I have filters on. I'll just do an Alt-AT to undo the filter, and then Alt-AT to put it back on. And so that's a way that when you hit Alt-AT to get rid of that filter, all of your transactions come back because nothing is being filtered anymore. You put it back on, and now you can start updating things again. So that would be how you could filter. You could also filter by a color. So if I only wanted to filter by yellow, as an example, maybe I flagged those 2 transactions in yellow because I wanted to investigate those. Now I have, now as opposed to sorting them, I've actually filtered them. Alt-AT to turn that off, Alt-AT to turn it back on, and I wasn't clicked in my data, so it wasn't working. So Alt-AT, yeah, so I've sort by color. You know, sometimes I will, I mean, you could do a number filter. I personally haven't used this one a whole lot, but what this would mean is within here, maybe we only want transactions that are bigger than, let's see, number filter greater than or equal to $1,200. And I'll click OK. And now I've got any transaction that is over $1,200. All right, so that's just another way I could do that. Alt-AT, Alt-AT, take it on and off. Take it off and on, I meant. The other thing that I just wanted to show you, when you do filter, as opposed to, you know, hitting select all and then just selecting the ones you want. Let's just say you wanted everything except widget A, then you just click widget A and you click OK, and now you've got all of them except widget A, so you don't always have to hit that select all thing at first. The other thing, like if you're within a customer, and here it's pretty easy to find it, but let's just say that you had, I don't know, hundreds of different customers, then you could end up just typing some information in here to restrict it to that customer. Like I could type in 108 and now you can see that it brings up 108 there kind of automatically. It kind of brings it to me. And I think if I did those, that would work. Yeah, now it's just 108 as an example. So it just helps me search when I do this search box here for information that I want to filter. I think if I hit a B there, yeah, so now it's kind of thinking, it's like, okay, we only have one thing that has a B in there. We could just search for it with that. Again, I would use this more if I had dozens or hundreds of pieces of information, and I only wanted to pull up certain items out of it. So yeah, the filter, that's a lot of uses of the filter. That thing's awesome. So I use it all the time. It's a great one to do. Now, sort data. This one, I always used to use this one before filtering, but what this is getting into is it's data sort. I usually am doing just a one column sort, so I'm sorting just using the filter, or I want to, or maybe I'm trying to sort by two things, so I do one thing first with the filter. Like maybe I'll put Alt-A-T. Maybe I want the widgets organized, but I also want them organized by customer. So I first sort by customer and then by widget. So now it starts off with widget A and then it kind of goes sequential through the customer. Like that would be a way I could, because I did customer first sort and then product, what it effectively is doing is going to show all the widgets and then sort within those by customer. Now, another way that you could have done that, I'll get rid of the filter, is you could do a sort, all right? And I can go ahead and I can hit data sort, and you can see that it says, does your data have headers? And I usually have headers on my data, not always, but I usually have it. And let's say that I first wanted to sort by product. And then now I could add a level, and then I want to sort by customer. And then I'll add a level, and then maybe within that, I will sort by invoice date, and I even want the most recent ones first. All right, so it's going to go through the product and the customer, then the invoice date. So this is just, I mean, you can keep adding as many levels as you want. So I'll go ahead and I'll click OK. So I've got my products and widget A, there's only one sale to customer 101, but widget A has two sales to customer 102, and you can see that the most recent is listed first. So I don't use this sort a whole lot because I'm usually just trying to sort once. And so I just use a filter. But if you need to sort by a few items at the same time, that's how you would do that. Now, I probably could have accomplished what I just did with the filter, but and just sort of descending by invoice date first and then by customer and then by product, right? But sometimes it's just easier to visualize by using that sort feature. So go ahead and just go ahead and the data sort. And again, if you didn't have headers, then I'm in an example of that, and I'll make sure I can undo it. But if I deleted this right there, I deleted that row with a control minus. And then if I went into data sort and it says my data has headers, it really doesn't. It's just kind of getting into that first transaction right away. So now I would uncheck that box. All right. So normally I have headers, so I don't have to worry about that. Do a control Z to undo the deletion of that header and to get it back. But yeah, that is the sort. Now let's go ahead and create a pivot table. And within a pivot table, there are so many ways that you could do this. I am just going to be showing some basic uses of a pivot table. We could have a whole couple-hour training or more just based on that. So then a pivot table, and I'm still working on module 4, so I'm just going to put a filter on, and I'm going to get that back, and then I don't really need those highlighted anymore. So I'm just going to hit home, no fill. I go to the next one and I just hit F4, which repeats my action, and I get that fill off of that one too. But a pivot table, to analyze data, I will do an insert and then pivot table. right? So that's how you get there. There is a shortcut if you do these a lot. You could do Alt N V. And again, when you're doing these shortcuts, when you do Alt, you can see for insert, it's the N. When you're doing pivot table, it is the V. All right. And then you would actually do a T as well. I don't use pivot tables enough to actually use that shortcut. I usually just do insert pivot table. But if you use them all the time, I mean, I use them a lot, but I'm not creating them very often. I create one and then I analyze the heck out of it versus filters. I'm constantly turning those on and off. So I've got a pivot table right here, and these things are finicky how you work with them. But once you figure it out, oh my goodness, the power of just analyzing data within these. We hear a lot about data analytics in the world right now, and pivot tables to me can still get a ton of your data analytics done. So let's just say in this situation, and I have to make sure that I've clicked within the pivot table here to get the pivot table fields up. So I click within that pivot table. Now I've got my pivot table fields up, and we can do some stuff as follows. So let's just say for product, and if I just click on that box, you can see that it's put it in that row. And then if I click on amount, now it has put it. It's kind of like detecting what sort of format your data is in. It was within text with product, so it put it into the row. It was numbers, so it put that into the values. And now very quickly, we just see the total of our 5 product sales. All right, it's really slick, and we're good to roll, right? If I didn't want it by product and I wanted it by customer instead, I could do that. Now it's interesting. Once I click customer, I'm glad it did this. You can see the customer numbers are listed as numbers. So it actually said, well, maybe you're wanting to sum these up as well. I'll go ahead and I'll drag those down into the row, and I don't want to do the values here because it thinks it's trying to sum up those values as well. So in this situation, I might just want to get rid of it, and then I might want to go ahead and take customer number and drag it into this filter right here. So the filter actually gets done up top, and then now you could see you could just filter for like customer 102 and the total sales by that. Once you've actually done that, you've kind of been telling Excel that it's not a data that you want to sum up, but it's more of a label. Now you could drag it into columns. Now you could drag it into customer number, and you're going to be seeing then you get your different customer numbers and then your sales by those customer numbers. Maybe you would want to do product by customer number. And this is where it starts to get pretty fun, right? So we can see by product listed across the top and our customer number, what are our total sales. You could make it more specific, like the invoice date. You could drop into that top filter. You could click on it. You could click on any day within there and click OK. And then now it tells you on July 6th of 2018, we sold widget D to these 3 different customers. So I always say to start simple. Okay, so I can get rid of these just by dragging them to the outside, or I could have just clicked on them. But start simple, something like product, sum up the amounts, and then just experiment with dragging and dropping other items in. Now, I don't just have to sum them. I could value field settings. I could count them to see how many different times I sold each of these. There, it looks like we had 97 transactions, and here's how many times we sold each of our products. I could, as opposed to summing up the sale, I could average the sale. I could go ahead and click OK. Now I've got my average amount for each of those sales. I could do a value field settings. I could click on the max. I could click on the min, or a variety of different items. You can't do a median. I actually do like doing medians a lot, and I'm shocked that Microsoft Excel will not let medians into pivot tables. I kind of like, your company values about $3 trillion. Just figure out how to give us a median option, because I think there's a variety of us that would like a median as compared to an average. But so that's, those are some basic ways you could do it. just, play around with it. I'll sum it up that way. And then you can do things, like if you wanted to have dollar amounts on that, you could highlight this and then hit Control-Shift-1 to put a decimal, Control-Shift-4 to put dollar amounts in. So there's different ways that you can format them at that point in time as well. Let's see, I'll get back to these and then I will get rid of the decimals. All right, so now I've got commas in there. So yeah, just kind of a basic pivot table type of use. Now, if we look at, got to go back here. That was step 3, graphing the data set. So step 4. And you notice that your pivot table, you created it on a new sheet. It gave you an option to actually keep it within the Module 4 sheet. So like when you were in here and you did insert pivot table, it says, do you want it on a new worksheet or somewhere in this existing worksheet? I could have clicked right there and hit OK, and now it's within my existing worksheet. I'm going to hit Control-Z. I usually don't like them within a sheet where I have a lot of raw data. To me, that just gets that just gets a little bit clunky. Once you have your pivot table ready, you could do insert and then a chart. And there's different ways that you could consider a chart. You could do a bar chart here as an example, and you could do a quick bar chart on that one. Now, what's fun about that is you've got your 5 widgets at the bottom. You've got your dollar amounts right here. And again, you just run that pivot. You're running the chart right off the pivot table. Now, if you were to go in here, and I need to use an extreme example, let's change widget B, like just this sale, to $100,000. If I go back here, now that I've updated data, I have to right click and hit refresh. But when I hit refresh, now it has actually changed it in the pivot table, and it's changed the chart automatically as well. So if your data in your pivot table changes, your chart will refresh automatically. I'm going to go back and hit Control-Z because I don't want that to be there. Within pivot tables, another thing you can do is you can right-click and you can hit Sort and do largest to smallest. And what's interesting is when you have the chart open, it actually rearranged the chart at that point in time as well. Right-click, Sort, smallest to largest. You could see how that chart is changing also. So pretty cool to use a pivot table, and then you could just show this as a chart within Excel. Oftentimes someone then might put that chart into Microsoft PowerPoint to show others. Sometimes I'm going to get rid of the chart here. If I go back to the master guide, it says you can insert a chart with an F11. So if I am clicked right here and then I hit F11, now a chart is inserted. It's actually done it on another sheet. So that's just kind of another way that you can insert a chart, is just with that shortcut F11. And one of the final things that I do is sometimes, and I just want to clean up the chart in a way that, and you can do a lot of things, and we're not going to, do all this kind of stuff, but you could go under pivot table options, and there's a lot of different tools you can use to rename things, and then even when you were to create a chart as an example, if you just did it on the same page like this bar chart here, if we click on this and right click, we could change around data labels and change around names and descriptions and headers. So there's a lot of things that you can do. One of the occasionally I just can't, if I haven't used enough, I can't figure out by using this pivot table format how I want the chart to look. So what I'll do, and I'll quick, maybe sort it by widget here, is I will just grab some of this information, and maybe I'll hit a Control-C, and I want to paste it off to the right and then run a chart off that. I'll do a right-click, paste special values, right? And then I will do product dollars, whoops. And now I have it looking like I want. So when I hit insert bar chart, right away, it's maybe looking a little bit more I want with the descriptions and everything. So my point is that occasionally I will just copy and paste this data off to the side and run the chart off of that. And in order to do so, when I paste it off to the side, again, I just highlight all this. I hit a Control C. I bring it off to the right. I can either do a Control V just to paste it. Sometimes I do a right click and then a paste special values just to make sure that no formulas are in there. So when you paste, normally I just paste with a Control V, or if I'm pasting down, as I talked about in lesson 1, with a Control D, or to the right a Control R. But if you copy, you have a lot of options as far as how you paste, and go off to the right click, paste special. I could either right click, just go right to the dollars right here, or paste special, and I've got a lot of different options of how I can do things. So, and that would be another paste special values. There's a shortcut about how you can get there with Alt keys. I don't do that one enough to commit that one to memory. So that's, I don't know, just a variety of ways that you can analyze data and then depict it as well. So let's move on to Module 5, a sensitivity analysis. So to do this, I'm going to grab the master guide and I'm going to pull it over right here so I can just bounce back and forth, Control page up, Control page down. And so what I'm going to do with this one, what we can see is we have an actual year 2021 where we have some actual sales, expenses, and then we compute net income, and we can see that expenses are 80% of sales. And then we're going to forecast sales and expenses for the next 5 years. All right, so I've just kind of created a model here, and we're going to talk about how we could use that. So the point is not to create this model. But so what I've done is I've said, okay, I'm assuming that sales are growing by 5%, and if I wanted to, to illustrate this heavier, I could do like 50% sales growth, and you can see that these sales are now changing by 50%. And then expense efficiency, basically the company's controlling its costs better, as opposed to 2%. If I wanted to, show more expense efficiency, I could do 10% expense efficiency. And then this formula is driving off of that cell, and it's really keeping expenses a lot smaller right here, you see, as a percentage of sales. So we'll just get it back to 2%. But again, we do this frequently in accounting and finance, is that we put together a model and we have to make some assumptions like 5% sales growth and 2% expense efficiency, but we don't know if these assumptions are going to be right or not. So we need to, consider how our results might change if we end up with different results. So the first thing I wanted to do is it says fill the cell with the background color. All right, and a way that I could do that is my key assumptions right here. Oftentimes I will highlight key assumptions and I will just go click and then I'll hit the background color with a yellow. And then I'll go right here and then I will click to highlight that cell with a yellow as an example. So those are my two key assumptions when I'm putting together my financial forecast. And so I just want to just kind of pop those so people know what to expect that way. You also could have got their Alt-H arrow keys. So if I undid that for a second, Alt-H, and now I can do arrow keys within here. I'm just bouncing. I don't do this much, but Alt, H. Yeah, now I could just go into anything and I could just find that one. So again, some people might do that. I am not putting colors on very often, so I'm usually fine just to go click on it the first time and then for subsequent times hit an F4 because that repeats the action. But that's how you would do that. Now perform a function, an if function here. So we need to tell you a little bit about an if function. So let's just say that your net income goal, we can see at our base facts here that our net income goal is $350. Let's say the company wants to make $350. I'll just go ahead and I'll type that in. And I want this cell right here, cell I3, to tell me if that net income goal is met. So what I could do is I could say equals if. All right, type that in. and then open parentheses. And now I need to do my test. If the net income cell, and I went down to it there, and then I press is greater than, and then I could put my base fact in there right there, a 350, comma, then say yes, and I'll put that in quotes, comma, if that's false, say no, quotes, close parentheses. So what has happened right here is the actual prediction is that net income will be 382. My goal is to have at least 350. So are these projections resulting in me meeting the goal? Yes, they are. So that's why this formula right here is returning the word yes. If my net income goal had been 400, look at that. It changes to no, right? Because now my 382 does not equal my 400. Similarly, had this only been like 325, now it comes to no. So again, this equals if. I need to say, what is my argument? And I could just say, if this is greater than this, comma, then type in yes, otherwise, comma, and then in quotes, I say type in no. The quotes are needed just to return the text, and I have my items. You know, I would not have had to have typed this 350 in a separate cell. I could have simply put it right there, and then as you know, these items changed. What's happening there? So, if that's great, okay, I would have had to go less. Yeah, now it's going to no. So that's how we can do an if statement. All right, a lot of different ways that we can use those. There's some people that sometimes when you're doing an if statement, you could say, okay, and what you see the labels are telling you here is equals if you have a test, a value of true and a value of false. Sometimes people do what they call nested if statements that are like, okay, if the first part is true, then do another if statement. And then if that otherwise, if the first part is false, just do something else. So you could do if statements within if statements too. Okay, 5.3 here, show constants and formulas. This one is kind of interesting to me. So with now into these show constants and formulas, it says the key there, the shortcut is F5 and then hit special. I'll go back over here and I'm going to end up just removing this highlight. I'll highlight this and then I'll hit no fill. But if I do an F5, that is a go-to, and then I can do a go-to special. I can click constants, and then I'm just going to hit numbers right now. So I'm going to deselect these other items and just hit numbers. I'll click OK, and then we can now see what it's done is it has highlighted everywhere that I have a constant number, meaning that it's not a formula. And then maybe I would want to just label those with a yellow so that we always know which items are constant and hard keyed. And then I'll click off of that. So again, if I do a Control Z, and I could just, with my Control Z, I undo the coloring and then just key off to the side and I'm off that. But if I hit F5 special and then constants, and had I left text right there, okay, now it would highlight a lot of that text. And maybe I don't want all that text highlighted, so I'll click off to the side. I'll hit F5, special, constants, and I only want the constant numbers to be selected, and then I'll hit a yellow. I could also do an F5, special, and then maybe I just want the formulas that result in numbers to be highlighted. I could go click OK, and now everywhere where there's a formula that's going to result in a number. So again, like this if statement was a formula, but it's not a number. So I could do these formulas, and then I could highlight those in whatever that I wanted. I could do those in a dark green, or I could just choose that way. So I like this for a spreadsheet. If you're looking at a big spreadsheet and you're like, okay, what is constant? Where are the formulas? What do I have to review? You can just highlight it like this in order to check that out. Now, usually I would not do both of these. So if I'm going to highlight the constants, I'll just hit Control Z and I'll undo what I did to highlight the formulas. So I'll know that kind of the rest of the stuff is formulas. All right. So that's kind of a fun one. Data table. Oh, a lot of people don't know how to use these and they're awesome. So now what we have here is we have a company that has actual results in 2021. It's forecasted for the next 5 years, and it kind of wants to know what is our net income going to be in that 5th year. There's no way that they're going to know that for sure, right? It's just impossible to know that for sure. But you have to make a forecast sometimes. What can be nice is to show how that forecast is going to change at different assumptions. All right, so let's look, for example, your net income at different sales growth rates. So what I could do right here is I could put in 3%, and I'm going to do this in cell C15. It's important to do these in the proper order. So I recommend doing that in cell C15. Do a 5% here in D15, 7% here in E15, and then now in cell B16 equals. And then go up to net income. Okay, so I'm like, what I'm trying to say is, what is my net income going to be at all of these sales growth rates? I highlight this range. Data, what if analysis. I got to move my Zoom bar here, or my recording bar. Data, what if analysis, data table, and the change I'm making is in a row. And what I'm changing is my sales growth rate. I'll click OK. And now what we see is that at a 3% sales increase, net income is going to be $347. At a 5% sales increase, it's going to be $382. The same as right here, because that's actually what in our data. And then at a 7% sales increase, it's going to be $420. You know, I could change this. I could do 10% right there, and it'll update automatically also. So again, what I needed to do, and I bumped into a different sheet there. I have to type. You know, I can't do 3% here, 5% here, 7%. Let me do this. It wouldn't work if I mistyped it. And I couldn't do like over here equals net income. And then try to highlight this range and hit data, what if analysis, data table, row input cell, 5%, click OK. You can see that it's kind of getting messed up that way. There's a lot of different ways that it can get messed up. These have to be hard keyed. All right, and then you have to put it in this cell right here, and this has to link to a formula, and it has to link to a formula that is impacted by these hard-keyed cells. So these hard-keyed cells must be related to an item which is impacting the formula that you're trying to return. Okay, so you have to set it up like that. Data, what if analysis, data table, row input cell, 5%, go ahead and click OK. Now, you could also do this in a column format. Frankly, I usually would do it in a column format. So expense efficiency, we could say, well, what if we aren't going to have any expense efficiency? What if we're going to have 2%? What if we're going to have 4%? Maybe even up here I could do, what if we're going to have a minus 2%? It's not like you just have to have 3 items. So I'll just kind of type those in. Now I could do, once again, equals net income. Okay, so I've set it up now more in this vertical format. And again, it has to be in these type of cells. Like this 382 has to be up and to the right. So now I highlight this information. I hit data, what if analysis, data table. Now it's a column input cell, and this is for expense efficiency. Don't do sales growth right there. I mean, if you did, it would be then just changing that 5% to whatever, you know, it would, if you clicked on the sales growth, it would be changing the 5% to these 4 items. That's not what we want. We want to do the expense efficiency. So now you click OK. And we can see that our base case, if we have 2% of expense efficiency, our net income is 382. If we have more expense efficiency, 4%, that's a good thing. We're more efficient with our expenses. Then we would have the 510. If we don't have any expense efficiency or negative expense efficiency, basically meaning that our expenses are going up, we would get a worse net income result. Now, a weird thing for a lot of people is why we leave this little gap right here, and why we leave this little gap over here. Partly, I think it's because that's what we're going to use for a two-way sensitivity analysis. So let's do right here, minus 2%, 0%, 2%, and 4%. So I now have my expense efficiency in a column, and then let's do the sales growth, 3%, 5%, 7%. And now I've left this cell blank right here, and in this cell, I'm going to link up to net income. And I really like this two-way data table. The previous ones were the one-way, because now I can highlight this range right here, data, what if analysis, data table. My row input cell in my row is my sales growth. My column input cell in my column is my expense efficiency. This is my column that's related to expense efficiency. Now I click OK. I think it's always good to just check the base case. And so that's why I usually, in this kind of sensitivity analysis, I used my base case figures, so the 5% sales and the 2% expense efficiency. So there's my 382.88, right? But now I can see all possible combinations. Now, if I wanted to clean this up a little bit, I could highlight this, Control-Shift-1 to make sure I only have 2 decimals. Okay, it's looking a lot better at this point in time. So I can certainly see that the more that I'm growing sales, the more that I'm making expenses more efficient, my net income is higher, and vice versa. If I'm not growing sales as much, and if my expenses are actually going to be increasing because it's negative expense efficiency, then that would be my net income being the lowest. So pretty cool, right? Where I like to take it just one step further is, and I'm going to skip right here. I maybe should have done this to conditional formatting just because I'm on it. So I'm going to skip to that one quick. But right after I do this and I have all this highlighted, all right, I can do home, conditional formatting, color scales, and you can experiment with different ones, but I frequently just choose that first one. I think that first one is pretty good. Conditional formatting, color scales, and then click it. And we can see it's given color scales. And why I like the first one, I usually think of this like a stoplight. Green is go, which means good. Red is stop, which is bad. So my highest result is in green. My lowest is in red. So you can see that if a client, a boss, a colleague, other stakeholders wanted you to come up with a projection of net income, and they said, my best estimate is that sales are going to grow by 5% and expenses are going to be more efficient by 2%. But those are just estimates, and I really don't know. But I think maybe the reasonable range is as follows, from negative 2% to 4% for expenses and 3 to 5% for revenues. Now with one chart, you can have all of those there. So someone would say, well, hey, what is it like if we have 3% sales growth and no expense efficiency? They can just look at this chart. You don't have to sit there and manually change this in Excel. You don't have to go back and rerun it. In a chart like this is the type of thing that you could then pop into a presentation. Maybe you don't even have Excel open. So yeah, I love the look of that chart right there. Now a goal seek, I don't use this as much, but I'm going to show it to you. It's really cool. It's really cool. I just don't use it as much. But let's just say that we want to hit net income of $350. And we can see that currently we're above it. And I want to say, well, how much sales growth do I need to get net income of $350? I could go to my sensitivity analysis right here and I can see, well, it looks like it's probably a little over 3%. Right, here's my net income at different sales growth. It's closer to 3% than 5%, so it's probably like 3.2% or something. I don't know. I've not run it yet. All right, I could do data, what if analysis, I'm moving my record bar there. Data, what if analysis, goal seek. And now I could change my net income cell, and I have to click on something right there that's formula driven. And then now I have to, in the value, I have to click on something that's static. Actually, I can't even click on that. I think I just have to type in like 350. And then the cell I'm going to change would be sales growth. So I want to set the net income cell. I type in 350 by changing the cell sales growth. Now I click OK, and I see that at 3.1% sales growth, we are going to have net income of 350. And that assumes that expenses are staying at that 2% efficiency. I could click OK to keep that, and now it's in there. Okay. And well, if I wanted to then to get rid of it, I could just go back to 5%. Or data, what if analysis, and oops, not my record bar here. Data, what if analysis, goal seek, and I could set cell C7 equal to 350, and then maybe I want to change my expense efficiency instead. So I'll click on that this time. I could click OK. Let's see. So cell, not C7. I'm going to click on cell G5. I want G5 to change to 350 by changing expense efficiency. I could click OK, and I could see at 1.5% expense efficiency, we'd get to that 350. And then if I don't want to keep that, but I just kind of wanted to see it to double check it, I'd click cancel. So the goal seek's really cool. I just don't use it a lot, I guess. If you wanted to come up with that exact percentage in this situation, that's how you would do it. So that's goal seek. Put items in currency format and then in percentage format as well. All right. So currency format, like when I go down right here, if I highlight all these, and right now you can see that I have it in, I hit Control-Shift-1. That's how I got there. And that is something that I would refer to as basically number format. If I did a Control-Shift-4, now it's going to be currency. Now it's going to be in dollars. And so that kind of looks slick. The other one, and you can see that I said percentage right there is kind of the next thing, Control-Shift-%. Because let's just say that in your whole spreadsheet, I don't know if this is a great example, we'll find out. But let's say that almost everything on my spreadsheet I want in terms of dollars. So I'll do a Control-Shift-4 on my whole spreadsheet. And then I'm like, well, but there's a few items I want on percentages. So now I'll hit Control-Shift-5 right there. And then I'll hit Control-Shift-5 right there. I'll hit Control-Shift-5 right there to change it into percentage, Control-Shift-5, Control-Shift-5. You know, I don't know if I would do it exactly like that, but it shows you the Control-Shift-1 puts it in comma format. Control-Shift-4 is dollars. Control-Shift-5 is a percentage. The one other item, let's just say that you frequently do, you're just going to do Control-Shift-1, but you do not want it in, to have decimals. I say that hotkeys are great for this. This is one that I actually had, I taught this one in the part 1 video. So if you watch the part 1 video, this part's going to be a repeat, but this is one that I wanted to include in both videos because I think it's so important that way. But to do Control-Shift-1, if I then wanted to get rid of those commas, let's just say I don't like how that looks, I would have to go up here and hit decrease comma, decrease comma. All right, that's where I would do it. So again, Control-Shift-1, decrease comma, decrease comma. That's kind of clunky. Control-Shift-1, you can get there by doing an Alt H9. Alt H9. I also don't really like that. I think that's kind of clunky. So what I've done is I've created something called hotkeys up here. And it's within your quick access toolbar. If you click on the quick access toolbar, and I don't know what you have to the left there. Some of you might have an undo or whatever. But if you go into more commands, these are items that you can quickly do. And I'll encourage you you can remove whatever you have there if you don't use it. Okay, so like if you click on stuff up there, leave it there and make sure you can find out how to get it back. So I'm going to get rid of that stuff, and then I will go, instead of popular commands, to all commands. I think it takes just a minute to pop up. There's a lot of them. Now I can go to comma style and click add. Now I can go to decrease decimal and click add, and I'll click OK. And you can see that those are up here. So for me, if I have something right here, and let's just remember how it had kind of had a bunch of decimals to start with for whatever reason. If it starts there and I want to get this to like no decimals, but I also want commas in there if appropriate, I've created these shortcuts, and you get there by hitting Alt. And after you hit Alt, you can see a 1 gets you to the comma style. So I hit 1, and then I hit Alt again, and a 2 gets you to decrease decimal. So Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 2. That's how I will use my hotkeys, because those to me are a little clunkier to do. So you use a hotkey for whatever kind of thing that you do in Excel, and you have these in other Microsoft products as well. I use some of these in PowerPoints also. But you can use those whenever you want to make things more efficient. So that was hotkey. We did conditional formatting. And then the last thing I thought would just be fun. I love the random number generator. I'm going to go back to module 5 right here. And right here, I was, I'd started off this module by I typed in, I hard keyed something in order to showcase an if statement. The random number generator. If I just hit rand between and then hit 350 comma 400, it is going to give me a whole number between 350 and 400. I think it could be 350. So it's not like it's greater than 350, but 350 to 400, I hit enter, and it just returns to me a whole number. And now my if statement is based off that number. If I want to redo it, I could hit an F9. I'm not going to do that right now because I think that ends my video recording. So I can hit an F2 and then enter. I got 388. My net income is not meeting that. I ran between F2. Now it's down to 356. My net income is doing that. So ran between, I use that one whenever I want to investigate something. I could have gone back to module 4 as an example, and I could say, let's just say that I want to investigate one of these transactions to make sure that it's accurate. There's no fraud or whatever that way. I could just do equals rand between, and I think it's 10,000 or 10,097, I think is the range. And I could hit enter, and I could say, all right, 10,082. And then now I could maybe use a control F to go down to 10,082, and I could go investigate this transaction. After you do anything, like if you type something there when your rand between is on, it'll keep going. So you would need to just hard key this number over that, paste special values, or do something if you wanted to retain that information. But I love the random number generator as kind of a random sampling technique. So that got us through, let's see, so module 5. All right, I actually wanted to be going back to my PowerPoint here. I should have done this after module 4, but that's okay. So review questions from the last 2 modules here. So a shortcut for applying a filter. Which one of these would we not do? Do you know this one? Well, Alt-AT is my favorite. Okay. Control E. I actually had an error in there, so I paused the video for a second. Control-Shift-L, that'll put a filter on. Many people like that. Visual people like to just go click on data and then filter. Control-E is not correct. You're going to learn after a bit that one is a flash fill feature. We went through sensitivity analysis. These are all of the items that we just covered. So review question 2, to see how an input cell would need to change to reach an exact result, what would you use? Again, you're looking for one exact result, one input cell here. You would not use a data table, which is a what-if analysis or a sensitivity analysis, because that'll show outcomes at various inputs. You would not use a hotkey, which is personalized personalized shortcuts. You would not use a what-if analysis, which is like a data table. You would use a goal seek. That's how you would do that one. Review question 3. In an if statement, what is the first thing that you enter? Okay. So you do equals if, and then what are you doing? Row input cell, that's not a part of an if statement. The value, if false, is the last thing. The value if true comes after the logical test. The logical test is the first thing that you do. Equals if, open parentheses, and then what are you trying to test? So the next module that we're going to look at here, VLOOKUPs, people have heard about those quite a bit. They use those a lot more than HLOOKUPs, but we also are going to introduce you to something called XLOOKUPs. And in this one, we're going to touch on data validation, searching a data set to return a value, and then also opening the Excel formula window. All right, and I'll get back to that review question in a bit. So let me go over to the Excel file, and I'm going to grab the master guide and put it before module 6. All right, so data validation. With data validation, it's going to restrict data that you can put into a cell. So what I have here, and what we will look at is I have the 50 states, and I think I have DC in there as well. So we got 51 listed in column A, along with populations from one of the couple most recent years listed in column B. And let's just say that I wanted to be able to type a state in here like I'm from Minnesota, and have it return the population right here. Okay, it's not doing that. Well, I will do that actually through a lookup feature. But the first thing that I want to be able to do, I don't want to, risk being able to mistype Minnesota in doing that. So I'm going to do a data validation. Where is this guy? That's it. Yep. Data validation. And I only want it to allow a list. And then I'm going to go click on the source. Sometimes you want to allow maybe any value. Sometimes you want to allow a whole number that has a minimum or a maximum result, or a decimal that has a minimum or maximum result. But in this situation, I want to only allow a list. And my source, so I'm clicked on this box. I'm going to click on Alabama, Shift and down arrow key. And then I will click OK. Now what's happened is in this cell and in this cell only, you see that drop-down box that's popping up, right? So what this means is you could go into this drop-down box and you could find the items that you could pick. So you could pick Minnesota as an example. Now you also could type something in. You could type in DC. You could type in Iowa. That's all right. But if you misspelled Iowa, it'll reject it. All right. So it's keeping it kind of safe that way. Now for a population, that we're going to use a VLOOKUP. When you do a VLOOKUP, open parentheses, what you are going to look up is the state. So equals VLOOKUP, open parentheses, D3, comma. I want to look it up, and I'm going to click on A2, hold down my shift, go to B2. My shift is still down, and down arrow key, comma. Now I'm at the column index number 2. I want it to look at the second column, comma, and then I will type in false. If it does not find an exact match, it will give me an error. All right. So you can see what's happened right there is with Iowa, it returned Iowa's population. If I typed in Minnesota, it gives me Minnesota's population. So again, equals VLOOKUP, open parentheses, what do you want to look up? Click on that first, comma, select the whole range with what you want to look up and what you want to return. Highlight this whole range. Click on the first part, use arrow keys, end and arrow keys to highlight that whole range. Now, what do you want it to return? In this situation, it's in the second row, okay? So sometimes you have a bigger Excel sheet and you need it to return stuff, not the second row, but the second column, but maybe you want to return stuff in the fourth column or fifth or whatever. Then you could, type that in, and then I'll click false. I usually use false, which is an exact match. If you want the closest match, you can hit true. So that's really Slick, right? So I could do something like South Dakota, boom, we've got it. Now, one thing about that, like if I do data validation and I could clear all my data validation here, I'm going to go clear all. Okay, did it work? Yep, so it cleared it. So now if I do something like mistype Iowa, it's going to give me an error right there. So in theory, this is a safeguard for this type of file, right? That if you type something right, it works. If you type something wrong, it doesn't work. But I still think to put the data validation on there is a good technique. Now, one thing I want to show you, I've got Minnesota misspelled right now. So I'm going to go click on a list, click on source, go to Alabama, shift, end, down arrow key. I'll click OK. What it doesn't do is reject something that's already there. So that's why I'm getting the population error, because Minnesota is misspelled. It's looking up something that doesn't exist. But if I then tried to type in that, it rejects it. So let's see if I properly type in Minnesota. Now if I try to go back and misspell it, it's going to reject. Okay. For the longest time, I used the VLOOKUPs, and then an HLOOKUP is something that I would use only if my data was organized horizontally, which frankly, it isn't as much. When you're looking at big data sets, they're usually organized vertically. But if it was horizontally, the HLOOKUP would look similar. So the state here, I could do like Alaska, and I could do a validation if I wanted. I could click on it, allow a list, and then my source. Right now, I didn't put them all here. I just put a few, and then click OK. And then now I could type Alaska. And then now my population, and as opposed to HLOOKUP, it would be VLOOKUP equals HLOOKUP, open parentheses, go click on Alaska, highlight this range right now, and then hit comma 2, and then comma false. So now it's going to be looking at this horizontally instead with that range. And I must have just messed up something. I must have had multiple things. So I'm going to hit delete on top of that, equals HLOOKUP, open parentheses, go click on that, comma, go up to this range, comma 2, comma false, close parentheses, enter, and now it's working. Now the XLOOKUP. This is a newer feature over the last, few years, whatever. Where it is so neat is that the VLOOKUP requires the data that you want to return, in this situation, the population, to be to the right of the state. You can't look to the left. XLOOKUP allows it to be in whatever order that you want. So with XLOOKUP, let's type in Idaho here. I won't do the validation for now, but if I do XLOOKUP, open parentheses, look up the value. So I'll go to Idaho, comma, and then now it says lookup array. So I'm going to highlight my states, comma, highlight, because I'm looking for populations. Go to the first one and down arrow key, closed parentheses. All right. So I was able to do it in that different order. Okay, so I could put in Iowa right there. You can see it gives me Iowa's population. I'll put decimals on that, Alt1, Alt2, Alt2. Okay, so now I've got Iowa's population. So again, the XLOOKUP equals XLOOKUP, open parentheses, click on what you want, and then go up to where you want to look it up, and then comma. And then I do have to kind of just navigate back up to the top part of that data. So it's kind of like it's looking it up evenly in columns, close parentheses, and hit enter. I still use the VLOOKUP time to time only because I have used it so much. But the XLOOKUP is one of these that when my data is organized, that the information I want to return is to the left of what I want to look up. Perfect place to use an XLOOKUP. So those are cool. And about the only other thing I wanted to show you on this one is the Excel formula window. You know, if you're ever in something like this and you can't figure out, it's like, what was Boz talking about again? Like what formula I can't remember. You could go to F3 and it actually will pop up the formula window. All right, so F3 should pop up that formula window. Now I could go into, something clunky is kind of happening here. I could go into XLOOKUP. I could hit go. There's my XLOOKUP. I'll hit OK. And then I want to, look up Iowa. I then can go to my lookup array, shift and down arrow key. I can go to my return array. And I could go to my populations and then just go ahead and click OK. All right, so that's just another way. If you forget how to get that, you can actually go to the formula window, or you can hit an F3 to get to that formula window as well. And I think I was having an error. It's Shift F3. Yeah, I couldn't figure out why it wasn't popping up with the F3. It's Shift F3 opens up that formula window. That's what you do. All right, if I go back to my PowerPoint for just a quick check-in. So when you're using a VLOOKUP to only allow data to be returned when there is exact match, your final entry should be what? It's not your column index number. Okay, that's third. It's going to indicate the column in the array that should be returned. It's not the lookup value. That's first. You wouldn't do true. That's going to provide the closest match. You would do false. That would give you an exact match. Which lookup feature requires data to be listed in columns adjacent to each other with the data to be returned in a column to the right? Which one of those? The data to be returned is in the column to the right. It's not FLOOKUP. It's not an Excel feature. It's not HLOOKUP. That would be in the bottom. It's not XLOOKUP. It could be wherever. It's VLOOKUP, which is when you would need the data to be returned to the right. Summarizing data. So in this one, we are going to go through kind of how to sum up a range based on given criteria, how to subtotal data, and then also how to use the visible cells only feature. We'll go back to my template. So again, I'll grab that master guide and I'll put it right next to module 7, summarizing data. So the first thing we're going to do, we're getting kind of down there in this. I suppose we're most of the way through the video, but we're going to use a SUMIF in this one. So what this is, as you can see that we have a variety of assets. A company does, it has a couple hundred assets. It's got them categorized. If I did a filter, I could do Alt-AT, and then I could actually just hit this drop-down box. We've got autos, buildings, computers, equipment, and furniture. We've got different dates that we purchased, how much we purchased them for, whatever the accumulated depreciation is, along with net book value, sometimes called carrying value. Well, let's just say on the bottom of this that I wanted to sum this up by asset type. Very frequently, I'm just going to use a pivot table. So I don't use the SUMIF a lot. There are some times where I want to build this into a large Excel spreadsheet. So I'm just going to show you this feature. Just be aware that if you've only got like this data set right now and you're just trying to get that snapshot and sum things up, a pivot table is going to be the most common. But maybe I want to put it, right below this information right here. Well, in this situation, what I need to do is I need to write down my asset types. So automobile, building, computer, equipment, furniture. All right, so I'm just going to go down to the bottom. I'm going to just click on automobile, hit Control-C, go down to 204 and hit Enter. Building, Control-C, go down here and hit Enter. Computer, Control-C, go down here and hit Enter. Equipment, Control-C, down here and hit Enter. And then furniture. Go find it. And then go down here and hit Enter. The only reason I did that is so I didn't mistype anything. But now what I want to do with my SUMIF, I want to say equals SUMIF, open parentheses. And now it wants the range. All right. So I'm going to highlight this range right here, comma, and now go over to where it says automobile. So now I'm looking at that criteria. So if this range is an automobile, comma, then I will go up to my dollar signs and then hit closed parentheses. So not the dollar signs, but the amounts. So my range is in column B. What I want to look up is in B204, and then my dollar amounts are in column D. I hit enter. This is now the sum of my automobiles. Now what can be nice is I can go ahead and I can paste this down with a control D, and it'll sum up buildings, computers, equipment, and furnishings, with one exception. Every time that it's pasting down, it's kind of shifting those Excel. Basically, it's shifting the Excel down as well. So when I redo this here, I want to create this formula once and only once so that I can paste it down and to the right and have it work. So I'm going to do equals SUMIF, open parentheses, and my range, I'm going to go to the bottom part, shift and up arrow key, and I'm just going to then highlight right here. So B2 to B202. Before I get off that, I'm going to hit F4. It's going to lock that down. Comma. Now I'm going to go to automobile, and I'm going to hit F4, not once and not twice, but I'm going to hit it 3 times so that it locks down the description, but it doesn't lock down the row. I'm going to hit it one more time, comma, and then I'm going to go up to these dollar amounts and highlight them. I'm going to hit F4 not once, but I'm going to hit it twice so that it won't lock down the column, but it will lock down those rows. Close parentheses, because when I get that done, and this is kind of using that anchoring technique, I can highlight this range right here with a control D, and that's summing all of that up, and then shift right arrow key twice, control R. Okay, and it's summing all of that up as well. And if I just wanted to verify that was working, I should be able to hit an alt equals right there, 21918. Should be able to hit an alt equals right there, 21918. Okay, so you just kind of do it once. And this is kind of now a nice summary below the data, right? And if you wanted then to total it up and just do an alt equals and then paste that off to the right with your control V's or whatever that way, control C, control V, or control R, boom, you got it. So it can be a nice way to show the data sometimes. Again, normally I'm going to do a pivot table, but there are definitely times when I do this SUMIF. I actually learned this technique. I started my career at PW before the C. I was down in Arizona. This was probably back in late 1996 or early 1997. I remember being in a conference room down there and ended up learning that SUMIF feature. So it definitely has usage. All right, so we've got that SUMIF there. Go back to the master guide. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtotal the data. Again, this one I would use even less than SUMIF. I'm usually going to pivot table it. And I'm going to delete, I think I should delete that. Okay, so I just highlight it and delete it. But with subtotaling, and I used to use it before I got in, so we're going back a lot of years, but just to make you aware, if you wanted to subtotal by asset type, the first thing you got to do when you're subtotaling is make sure to sort by whatever you're subtotaling. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So if I want to come up with subtotals for each of these asset types, I gotta sort for them first. And then data, and then I have to go to the subtotal. So you're in data, and then the subtotal you actually find in the outline group. So data, outline, and subtotal. So at each change in asset type, I want to sum up, and let's just click cost, accumulated, and depreciation, and carrying value. All right, if I click OK, it doesn't look like anything has changed other than adding some junk off to the left. But what this is that we are currently in view number 3, which is just all of your information. If you page down here, you see some subtotals as well as a grand total. It's not super duper helpful, but if you go to 2, this is the most helpful view. You could see the subtotal by asset type. If you went to 1, you would just see a grand total. So I usually would use this if I would do the view 2. All right, so when you're thinking of subtotaling, that's how you would end up doing it. Again, I don't spend a lot of time with that one. And sometimes if I'm going to do the subtotal, then I will maybe grab this and I will hit a Control C, and maybe I'll just hit plus to put a new tab in there. I could hit Control V, and what's happening is it's pasting all of this stuff. Maybe I want to take this subtotal and just put it somewhere else, just the totals. So now I hit Control C, Control V, but now it doesn't just have the subtotals. It grabbed everything, which is kind of bad, right? So I'll go back to this data, and then now I want to do maybe just the visible cells only. I'll go back to my F5, my special there, and there's my visible cells only. Click OK, and I got there again. I got there with that F5, the function F5. Control C. I go to this kind of blank sheet that I just started, and then now let's see if I hit a Control V, I'm good. And I've got all my information here, and it just copied my visible cells. I could double click, and I could actually just go right here and double click, and now everything is auto fit. So that's a little bit of how I would use the subtotal. And again, so if you want to paste that, and you have this all selected right here, but you don't want the data within it. You just want those subtotals. I'm going to my F5. I'm going to special. I'm going to visible cells only. I'm clicking OK. Now it's only going to take whatever I do to those, the Control C, go to my sheet, and I think I don't know, can I just, if I hit Control V, the formulas didn't go with it that way. So it's just basically pasting those cells. So that is module 7. If I go to the PowerPoint here, review question 6, what is the first item in a sum if formula? Criteria range, sum range, or value if false? Well, it's not criteria. That's the second part. It's not the sum range. That's the final item. Value if false is a VLOOKUP feature, so it doesn't even belong here. It's the range. We first select the range, then we look up the criteria within the range, then we go to the sum range part, and that is how we do that. That's how we do a sum if. Adjusting data. So we are going to be using text to columns, flash fill, and concatenate. I don't use these a lot, but when I do, holy smokes, do they save me an immense amount of time. It's kind of similar to that VLOOKUPs, and I meant to mention this when we did VLOOKUPs. I don't use VLOOKUPs every day, but when I use them, I need them so badly. All right, so let's go over here to module. Let me grab the master guide, pull it next to module 8. Text to columns, then flash fill, and then concatenate. So what text to columns will do is let's just say that I don't want Mr. and Andy Anderson. I don't want all that in one cell. I want it to be separated, kind of like what I have down here. Except let's just pretend I didn't have this information down here, right? But so I want to separate it. How you would do that? Data, text to columns. All right, delimited. You can use a fixed width, and then it will try to figure out if there's some natural spacing within your data. I don't do that unless I'm using numbers that maybe I just have different codes with the numbers, and it's always the first 7 digits and then the next 3 digits or whatever. Everything would have to be an exact width as it was entered. But I could hit delimited right there. Now hit next. And then it's well, when do you want to separate these things? Maybe I want to separate them when there is a space. I don't even think going to next is going to do anything for me. I just go to finish, and now it has separated those items out. So this one, there's a lot of different times that I use that. And you can see if I Control Z on this one, When I go back to that one, data and text to columns, there's a lot of different things. If I go next, sometimes it's separated by a comma. And then other times there's just a different, I'm trying to think, like, there'll be times when I'm looking at email addresses. So I might, go into other and I might type in the @ symbol, right? So I might do something like this sometimes, which would separate out an email address as an example. I'm not going to do that one right now, but that would be another time when I would use that. Here, it's certainly the space. So I'll get rid of that. I'll hit finish. We've separated it out. So that is text to columns. Flash fill. Oh my goodness, flash fill. And Excel is so smart with it now. But let's say you did want this combined together and not in different cells. You could just type in Mr. Andy Anderson. Let's say you want it all in one cell, right? And as soon as you start typing in Ms. for Beth Benson, Excel automatically flash fills that thing. If you didn't want that, let's make sure I didn't mess it up now, but Mr. Andy Anderson, Ms. Beth, then I would have to just do something like maybe hit my backspace key or whatever I was trying to do, if I didn't like what Excel was defaulting to. But another thing, so usually it happens automatically. If it doesn't, I might just kind of start my pattern and then highlight all my data and hit Control E. So Control E is the flash fill feature, but you usually don't have to use it because Excel pops it in automatically. It is so sweet. The last thing on this one is the concatenate. All right. And what concatenate does is it's just if you wanted stuff to be a little bit different than flash fill. So, but what concatenate would do, concat, open parentheses, go ahead and click on the Mr. and then a comma. And then I'm gonna put in a quotes, space, quotes, comma. Go ahead and click on Andy, comma, quotes, space, quotes, comma, and then go click on Anderson and hit closed parentheses. So now it's kind of built that in. All right. I go down and I hit Control D and it puts it in all throughout. Usually the flash fill feature, I don't have to concatenate much anymore because the flash fill feature can fill it out, and I don't even have to hit the Control E. Like Excel figures it out automatically. But had I wanted to do something, and I think it's had I wanted to do something really unique, like even Mr. Anderson and Ms. Benson, like it's still working, right? But let's say that Excel hadn't noticed it, because it doesn't always do exactly what you want. It's still good to know how to do a concatenate, because if you don't know how to do it and the flash fill feature doesn't work, then you could get stuck doing a lot of manual work. But concatenate, I could go to the first one, comma, quotes, space, quotes, comma, now go to Anderson, close parentheses. That didn't work. Equals concat, open parentheses, Mr., comma, quotes, space, quotes, comma, go to Anderson, close parentheses, highlight, Control D, and it works. So that's another example. And I think just with that text to columns, this is, if I'm looking at the master guide here, with concatenate, data, text to columns, delimited, next. This might be one where I have a semicolon. So now I hit finish, and now it has actually separated my email addresses into different cells here, right? And then maybe if I just wanted all my email addresses in separate cells, now I could go down and I've got my email addresses in a point to do. Looks like I actually have a space in between them. I could delete that space out as well. Yeah, so it looks good there. And let's just say that I didn't want the @ and I just wanted to know the start of the email, different from almost like the domain. Now I could do like a data, text to columns, next, semicolon, other, @ finish. So I could do something like that if I had just wanted to separate out my data. Yeah, if you go to the next review question, concatenate must have a minimum and maximum of how many fields? All right, well, I didn't cover this, so we'll cover it right now. It's not a minimum of 1 and a max of 2, all right? It's not a min of 2 and a max of, and no max. It's not a minimum of 2 and a max of 5. It is a minimum of 1 with no maximum. And then the last little module, it's a quick one with transpose and paste, but we're just going to transpose and then paste, paste into a PowerPoint. If I go to my data right here, I could, again, take the master guide over, but all I'm going to be doing is using the transpose and then paste a picture. One thing I learned this one more recently, and right now we can see that the data is more wide than long, and frequently you want to transpose it. And there's different ways that you could copy and transpose this. Now it does have formulas in here as well. A really cool way that you can do this is just equals transpose, and I learned this just within the last couple of years, and then go highlight all of my data. Okay, I probably could have used a control A there as well, and do a a close parentheses. So equals transpose, and I highlight the data that I want to transpose. If I hit enter, equals transpose. Close parentheses. Look at that. It takes it from basically being more horizontal into more vertical, and it keeps those formulas live, right? So I click something, I updated it above in June, and now it updates it down below as well. So that might just be where it's easy to capture the data in a horizontal format like above, but then you actually want to depict it in a vertical format. And when I say depict it in a vertical format, what I'm meaning is maybe you want to put this into a PowerPoint presentation. And then there's different ways that people might want to do this, but we'll clean this up. I'll do an Alt-1, Alt-2, Alt-2. I'll grab it like this. I'll highlight this. And then sometimes when I'm pasting into PowerPoint, that I'll go ahead and I'll put all borders on here. I'll hit Control-C. And now I will go back to my PowerPoint. And I'm actually just going to hit File. Nope, I don't want that. I want to do a new slide, blank. And then when I go on to this new slide, right click, and then you can actually just paste with a picture. I don't know if this has always been there. And some people don't like pasting with pictures. I have found a lot of uses for them. So just right click, paste with a picture. So if that's how you want this data depicted, you've got a nice little picture here. So that's an example of how you could take data that looks like this, put it vertically, paste it into a picture into your PowerPoint slide. And just as we wrap this one up then, the slideshow from the current slide, the last review question, you have data in 4 rows and 50 columns and you want to reverse it so the data is in 4 columns and 50 rows. You would use what feature? Not paste special, formats or formulas or values. You would use transpose. That's what I got. I'm trusting you all learned at least a couple things. So if you didn't, I did the best I could. Take care, everyone. We'll see you for another one.